entry. I'm doing a quick sound test for those who are coming in right now. For the last, I believe, 10 people. If you can hear me, please type yes in the chat box, which you could find below in the screen. Thanks. Great, I think we're going to get started. Thank you all for joining this session. This is a webinar sponsored by the Leadership and Management Division of the Special Libraries Association. And we're really pleased to have three stellar speakers who will talk about their project, collaboration, and partnership in supporting innovation for library services and resource management. The three speakers include Maggie Farrell, who is the Dean of Libraries at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, a system serving over 31,000 students. Previously, Maggie was the Dean of Libraries at Clemson University and the University of Wyoming, and Associate Dean of Libraries at Montana State University. She authors the Leadership Reflection column in the Journal of Library Administration, as well as other presentations and other writings. Next, we have Barbara Kawecki, Director of Customer Retention, YPB Gobi. Barbara is actually collection development and workflow solutions from the Western US and Canada, and is responsible for management and growth of Gobi Library Solutions business throughout the Western US and Canada. Barb has more than 23 years of experience selling information products and services into the academic library market. And finally, we have Rick Branham, Vice President of the Pre-Sale Solution Academic Library Initiatives. Rick has 3 decades of experience with Cersei's Dynex, including support, product management, business development, marketing, and sales. Formerly leading the Asia Pacific region, he now drives Cersei Dynex's vision and strategy for academic libraries. He also leads the Pre-Sale Solution Group, which leverages the Blue Cloud platform robust extensibility to develop creative and innovative solutions for libraries. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping rules. If you have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat box, and we will take your questions at the end and have our speakers respond to them. And one last question before we begin. If everyone can just let us know where you're coming from. If you could just type in the chat box your location and region. We're just curious to see where folks are attending. Great, we have folks from Michigan, New Jersey, Oregon, North Carolina, New York City, Indiana, Boston, Illinois, Ohio, Texas, Minnesota, Virginia, Iowa.
Wow.
Arkansas, Washington State, Florida. Well, sounds like we have folks from everywhere. So good morning and good afternoon. And thank you again for joining. And then I'll pass it to Maggie.
Thank you very much, Ray. I appreciate the introduction this morning. Barb, Rick, and I are thrilled to be meeting with everyone today on a topic that we often gripe about in librarianship. But unlike talking about the weather, we might be able to actually do something about forming partnerships that advance our mutual library goals. It is a passion for the three of us, and it likely got started when we were commiserating about how vendors and librarians do or don't get along, probably in a bar somewhere. And we thought, well, we think what has worked well for the three of us might help others in talking about our experiences. So fundamentally, collaboration is a value of librarianship that enables libraries to leverage resources for regional and group success. Collaboration brings together expertise, enabling partners to build greater capabilities to meet library objectives. As collaborations are formed, typically as librarians, we look to fellow librarians, maybe to some government agencies for assistance. But there is another potential partner that sometimes we overlook, and those are our vendors. The financial objectives of vendors may make them suspect because their motives are profit-making. However, vendors also possess deep knowledge of industry trends, unique skill sets, and an extensive network of experts. Vendors share the same desire to solve library problems, and a collaborative project might be a win-win situation. So by partnerships, we're stressing that it's possible to go beyond the standard purchase agreement to a more focused relationship. But even if you're not seeking a partnership, hopefully our discussion today will be informative about how to work with vendors and how to develop a closer relationship. Ray, if you would advance the slide. Oh, you're already there. Thank you. So today we will cover why we partner, the benefits for libraries and for vendors, how to partner, looking at characteristics of effective partnerships, and how to transform from a typical vendor relationship to a partnership relationship. We will also look at how to resolve problems, focusing on communication. And then finally, we'll talk about what happens when a partnership ends or how to break up. And we'll finish with question and answers. So next, Barb Kawecki will talk about partnerships and why to partner.
Thanks, Maggie. So I think, as everyone knows, our industry is really one where we all depend on each other for success. This mutual dependency provides many opportunities for libraries and library vendors to partner together to design products and services that enrich our market, take advantage of new advances in technology, and to provide industry-wide practices that ultimately help meet our patrons or our end users' needs. For vendors to provide the most valuable products and services to libraries, they must have a thorough understanding of the issues and the problems that libraries are facing today. And I think this can best be accomplished with partnerships and collaboration. Not understanding the needs of libraries can be both costly to vendors and ultimately sometimes fatal. Next slide, Ray. So why partner? Why would partnering with a vendor make sense for a library? What's in it for the library? For one, economies of scale. Libraries need expertise and resources, and vendors can develop software, products, and services faster, cheaper, and more efficiently than a library could do on its own. Nowhere, I think, is this more apparent than in the ILS LSP sector, which Rick can talk about. Secondly, while I think you might be an expert on your library, vendors have a much broader view of trends and what's going on in our marketplace. So, for example, in the normal course of the year, I manage a team of 8 librarians who cover 24 states and the country of Canada. So you might say that they have a 35,000-foot view of what's going on in terms of library budgets, workflows, new directions that are happening in those regions. They really do have their finger on the pulse of what's happening with libraries. And vendors can be a great source of information on what might be happening in terms of consortia activities in the region, and may be able to put you in touch with exactly the person that you need to talk to about a project or a problem that you're trying to solve. So from a vendor perspective, the library needs expertise and resources, but the vendor also needs to understand workflow. So those are really the kinds of conversations that we're having with our libraries on a regular basis. Sometimes a library approaches us with an idea for a project, and sometimes we approach them based on what we know about their interests and workflow. So at the end of the day, there can be all kinds of shared vision and common goals in working together. We might be developing a product and need confirmation that we're moving in the right direction. So we may ask libraries to be part of a focus group or to stop and have a quick conversation with us on the direction that we're taking. Longer term, many vendors also use advisory boards to drive and shape the direction of their product development. These tend to be much longer term commitments, and since these boards are privy to information that may not be public yet, the members are usually asked to sign a NDA or non-disclosure agreement. They think these are also great ways to get involved with product development and really drive the shape of technological products in our industry. Partnering with a vendor is also an opportunity to be on the cutting edge of new products and services. It's an opportunity to shape a product and service that really fits with what your library is looking to accomplish. It's really a win-win situation for both the vendor and the library. We've had a couple of projects that we worked on recently that, unbeknownst to us, were just exactly what the market was looking for. One was a library in California asked one of our collection development managers to help them develop a library collection to help them expand their collecting for diversity. So how do you bring in books that are the new voices within our publishing industry today? And what came out of that project is we were able to develop a diversity profile that is almost an out-of-the-box solution for many of our other libraries. And it's something that we've been working on over the last period of time. Another project that we just finished working on with the Library Consortia is to help develop a portal so that their faculty can discover open educational resources to support their affordable textbook initiative. This actually turned into EBSCO's Faculty Select product, which we're now able to offer to all libraries as of this fall. So really the opportunity to confirm development and drive product direction is really, I think, an opportunity for libraries. Rick is going to talk about how to partner and describe some of the elements of effective partnerships.
Great, thank you, Barb. So Barb talked a little bit about how to partner, or why you should partner, and I want to discuss more on how to partner. You know, often when you're, and next slide, Ray. You know, understanding that a collaboration with a vendor could be useful, there are a lot of things you should keep in mind as you seek out a partner. One of them is finding partners that have a shared vision, and certainly a vendor that has articulated goals that align with your own institution's goals in whatever area you're considering a project. And then you need to make sure that the vendor that you're choosing has the ability to carry out a sustainable solution. Next slide, Ray. So to break that down a little more, let's talk about shared vision. So finding the right vendor may not be as easy as you would think. You probably shouldn't just Google a vendor that seems to have a product in the area you're looking at, although that may be a good place to start. It takes a little more work to get to know the vendor and understand exactly what areas they're developing in and what their goals are, what their vision is. And, you know, we would encourage attending things like user groups, receptions at various conferences, presentations that the vendor is hosting. You know, it's not only about getting free food and drinks at these receptions, but it's a good way to meet the people involved and to understand kind of the hierarchy, how these vendors work in an internal basis, but also to informally talk a little bit about your projects and how that could benefit both of you. You need to do some work too, reviewing the vendor's track record. Have they done collaborative partnerships before? How did they turn out? What kind of partnerships has the vendor been involved in? And again, often approaching these things in a more informal basis with vendors can uncover some really good information. In terms of common goals, again, it's not enough just to say, have a vendor tell you, yeah, this is an area we really want to excel in, but a vendor needs to be committed to the particular area you're pursuing and be able to articulate the problem. So they need to understand that the problem you're trying to solve is indeed an issue and that they agree that both sides would benefit. One thing to keep in mind is that as a library working with a commercial vendor, the vendor's going to have profit goals and considerations. In order for it to be a win for the vendor, there has to be revenue implications, whether those are direct revenue considerations, like they're going to sell this product and make X amount of money, or even indirectly, creating this product is going to lead to sales in other areas, for instance. But understanding that and having a vendor that can articulate that, yes, we see that having this product would definitely benefit us financially is going to be a big, go a long way into solving this particular problem and leading to collaboration. In terms of sustainable solutions, what I'm talking about there is having a vendor that has the skills, the staff, and again, the track record for creating a detailed implementation plan. There's a lot of work involved to have complementary skill sets. So you need to have the right kind of staff that can leverage skills that the vendor is going to bring to the table. And you need to know that there's going to be the right resources devoted to making a particular project a success. And the vendor needs to have, be able to articulate a clear plan that shows that the solution is going to be sustainable and scalable. Often vendors might say, yeah, we can hack this particular workaround to solve this need, but likely that's not going to be a sustainable approach. You need to have a vendor that can, engineer a product that's going to be streamlined, and really to be a long-term sustainable project, it needs to minimize manual processes that may come from a hack or a workaround. I just want to talk about a couple different projects I've been directly involved in that would illustrate some of these things I just discussed. In talking with a vendor when I was in Australia, we won a big library services platform bid with the state of South Australia, and they were purchasing, again, the library services platform and discovery, but they had clearly articulated that the project would not include acquisitions. And again, as we met with the folks involved and talked with them on informal and formal basis, we find out what was going on there. They had a bespoke system they had developed. They were very proud of the kind of innovative approach they'd taken to selecting and purchasing materials. So they were doing decentralized selection, I should say, at the member libraries, and then centralized ordering to leverage bulk purchasing arrangements with vendors. And they had come up with some really cool approaches to bring the price down and delivery down of materials. And so they had planned on just hiring a vendor just to develop this bespoke solution for them. And as we started talking, we realized that we indeed were in the design phase of developing such a selection and procurement system. And I proposed that we work together, and we went through several on-site and remote meetings to talk about the process, the goals, all these things I just reviewed. And it ended up being a project that lasted for about 2 years and is now the basis for our Blue Cloud selection and acquisition system. I also worked with a group of libraries, again, at a user conference, and we started talking about course list management for instructors at universities. And many of them were considering or were already using a small, rather niche system that existed only in the UK to do such a thing. And anyway, that led to a much larger discussion and eventually a partnership with 5 universities in the UK to develop a course list management system as part of our Blue Cloud platform. But again, all these things came into bear in vetting each other and determining clear goals and defining success, and that has led to a near release. We're almost ready to release version 1 of that product next year. So I think that's all I need there. So next.
Great, thanks, Rick. And I'm going to talk about how to make the partnerships work, or how to make a partnership work. Next slide, Ray. So I think vendor partnerships are just like any other relationship, and they can require care and feeding. As Rick mentioned, it's important to be open, communicate well. I also think it's important to be respectful of one another's time. I think when meeting together, it's important to have an agenda and to have in a meeting space that supports that agenda. Rick can probably talk a little bit later about some tools that they used in terms of different types of collaboration. But, you know, the question is, will you need to look at things together? Will you need to review technology together? Are you just having a conversation? All of those things need to be kind of thought through as you're having your initial meetings. Make sure that you have the tools and the space to make everything a useful exchange. For example, if a vendor is coming to your campus or institution for the first time, give them a little extra guidance in terms of directions, best places to park, and how to get to where the meeting is going to be. Also, where the coffee shop is, critically important. I always laugh when working with some of our younger sales reps who use their phones and Google Apps and Apple Maps and all of that to get places. Some of us old bogeys used to have to get to colleges and universities with paper maps back in the day, and it was a little bit of a challenge. So we always appreciate any additional assistance and help you can give us. As with any arrangement, library vendor partnerships can certainly benefit from having things in writing. This allows both parties to clarify roles, determine responsibilities, and clarify expectations. Especially in the case of projects, it may also allow for an outline of deadlines, timelines, implementation dates, benchmarks. Once a library and a vendor have committed to building a partnership or working together on a project, it's critical to document the scope of the relationship. As an academic bookseller, one of the tools that we use for this with our approval services is called our Memorandum of Agreement, or MOA. Some of you might be familiar with that, which is in essence a profiling document that we develop with the library to outline all of the various components of an approval or notification plan. The resulting document is a complex and very precise set of instructions that tell the story of that library's collection development goals. The profile itself becomes a living, breathing documentation of the collection development strategy of that library, and also of each selector, who are in turn working closely with their faculty. Rick, do you have some examples from your organization of the kinds of documentation that you use?
Yeah, so Barb, very similarly, we would develop something that internally is a scope of work, a statement of work. And for the South Australian project, it ended up being just about a 200-page document. But
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as you can imagine, a selection and procurement system is so complex and so involved that it wasn't enough to just say, yeah, we understand, we're going to develop something that lets you select materials and then order them and receive them and invoice them. But we started documenting every single aspect and getting down to wireframes and click-throughs and what's going to appear on the screen. And, you know, that may seem like overkill in collaborating to that level with the customer, but in the end, we uncovered so many things that they just assumed would be a part of what we were developing, and vice versa, that it was super helpful to clearly document what the expectations were on both sides. If we hadn't done that and we had just proceeded and delivered something to them that was missing some of these key things, I should say the relationship wouldn't have been as fruitful as it ended up being.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's really where the kind of review and revise, I guess I should say along the way, comes into play too, because even once you have kind of a documentation of the project and what everybody's expectations are, that can dramatically change at any point in time. So it's really important that it be kind of a living, breathing documentation of what you're working on. And it's important to kind of keep that up to date so that everybody can refer to that and essentially be on the same page. Next slide. And Maggie's going to tell us how to resolve problems.
So thank you, Barb. So one would hope that in any partnership that things move along smoothly and the project is completed on time, but we all know in relationships that there are problems. It's only natural. So in thinking about resolving problems, we have some advice, and hopefully some of our experiences will help you in resolving any problems that you might have in a partnership or in a relationship. So first, it's important to have the right people involved. This is something that all three of us have talked about in the past, is making sure on the library.
Oh, Maggie, I think we lost your audio. Okay.
It's a good thing the audio didn't die during the communication discussion.
Pete. And I have to say, if anybody's been watching the news the last couple of days, I'm a little worried about this quid pro quo statement coming up.
Exactly. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. My apologies. I think my headset was off angle this weekend, so I had my cell phone on the ready just in case. So we were talking about right people, making sure that you have the individuals who have the experience and the ability to contribute to a project. So sometimes within the libraries, we might have somebody who maybe is not really enthusiastic about the project, and they're assigned the project. So we want to make sure that we have the right people in the library, as well as the people on the vendor side who have the right expertise. So recently, in working with one integrated library system, we discovered that we had somebody who's brand new on the project. It really wasn't the right person on the vendor side. And so working with the vendor, we were able to articulate what the issues were and get the right individuals to work on the project. I think also we talked a little bit about this in forming an effective relationship. But I think also understanding as you're working through problems that we're all people, that we're in the same library space, and to put that humane touch in a relationship. So as you're resolving problems, just think of the humaneness about how you work through the problem, and understand that sometimes there are just natural mistakes. Other times it's a more egregious situation, and trying to have the right people who are having conversations, who are working that through. The next is as I started to mention, the communication. So making sure that you have honest and frequent communication, being transparent about the internal problems and the budgets and the staffing changes that might be going on within a library. So Barb might recall this, but at a previous institution, we had a significant budget reduction. And so we went to, at that time it was YBP, we went to YBP, explained what the internal situation was, and then we worked with YBP on a solution that would help us. And so that demonstrated to us a real partnership. And by being upfront and saying, we've just had this budget cut, we need a new way to manage this situation. And we reached out to YBP, who helped us negotiate that, that budget cut. If we hadn't approached this in a relationship way, I think the result would have been completely different. Barb also talked about constant monitoring of the partnership, solving problems throughout before they become too big, making sure that you're in constant communication through meetings, through maybe on your timeline, doing that checklist on your timeline. Rick mentioned attending conferences, receptions, and parties, not so much to get, a drink or a dinner, but really that's an opportune time to talk to different managers, different vice presidents, maybe even the CEO. I have resolved problems by making sure that I'm communicating with other individuals within the organization about what is going well as maybe things that aren't going so well. Barb was just joking about the quid pro quo. And so in today's news, that quid pro quo might bring up other things than we probably mean. But I think understanding that a relationship has a give and a take to it. So how I got to know Rick was not through sales, but at the time, and this is years ago, Cersei asked me if I would work with this new guy, his name was Rick, and if we would do a seminar on how to do a migration for an integrated library system. And understanding that what we wanted to do is we wanted excellent service, but also vendors need us to sometimes help them. And I think, Rick, you might have a couple other examples about how working on advisory committees or giving references might help a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. So my team does some engineering. We often develop prototypes and smaller projects outside of the mainstream development organization. I have an engineer and some user experience people on my team. But we're developing a product right now in collaboration with 5 different customers around the world. And it manages essentially, it extends the discovery applications using custom JavaScript and widgets. And this is a tool for managing those and doing some editing and statistical reporting, that kind of thing. But in drafting an agreement with my development partners, we were very clear up front that, the cost for participating in this was just really a gimme, a nominal fee. But we expected that they would test the product and show up to the meetings and give us feedback, but also ongoing, be willing to do some case studies with us and act as references. Which they were happy to do. I mean, they saw the benefit of what they were going to get and were willing to benefit us in our sales efforts for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Rick.
And I wasn't withholding any kind of financial aid in order for them to do that. It was all very above board. And anyway, I had to throw that in.
Well, and we hope that the documentation that is developed in the MOU is something, as you said, Rick, you can go back to and you can refer to that, because that documentation really guides the relationship. At the very end of the day, it could be that, the problems are not being resolved through communication, through seeing each other in an informal way. So at the end, some ideas to resolve problems. One is to take it to the proper level. So making sure that you're following the guidelines for how to resolve a problem. So are you calling it into the help desk? Are you making the complaint go higher in the organization through established steps? You don't want to take a minor problem to the library dean or director, nor do you want to take it to the CEO. So you don't want to, you want to make sure that you work the resolution up through the appropriate chain. And then as the problem escalates, then certainly do take it up as high as you can within the organization. I think it's also important that you document the conversations and the steps that you're taking to resolve the problem. So you're noting when a call was made, who you spoke with, but also making sure that that you're being factual and that you're talking about the impact. So a librarian might say, we cannot process interlibrary loans, or this impact is slowing down our cataloging. And as a result, our users don't have immediate access to new materials. So making sure that you're documenting the exact situation, you're documenting the impact, you're doing it without emotion. These are the facts. And then making sure that you're documenting those conversations and the steps that you've taken to resolve the problem. And hopefully, by following all of these steps, hopefully the problem is resolved and that you continue on with a very solid relationship. But sometimes relationships do end, and so I'll turn it back over to Barb to talk about the end of a partnership.
Thanks, Maggie. Next slide, Ray. So I always feel like I should sing "Breaking Up is Hard to Do" for this slide. You all really don't want me to. So sometimes a partnership ends very naturally. You come to the end of a project, it's a very logical conclusion. But sometimes there are times where you really need to end a partnership for other reasons. So I think it's important to understand why the partnership is ending. And whether a partnership ends amicably with both sides reaching the goals at the onset, or whether the partnership was ultimately unsuccessful, there's a few things that should be considered at the end of a partnership. First, assess why the partnership ended. I think it's important for both sides to do that assessment. If it was a positive experience, you may want to work together again. And if it wasn't a positive experience, it's important to reflect upon what was unsuccessful and what you can do next time to have a better partnership. So what were the areas of concern? It's also important at this stage to remember not to burn bridges. If you're breaking up for reasons because the partnership didn't conclude well, we have to remember, as Maggie said, that everybody in this industry is be humane. It's a very small industry and people move around. So, for example, I've worked with Maggie at 4 different institutions over the last 20 years. Rick has actually been at the same institution the whole time, but I've been at a couple different organizations as well. So I used to joke with new sales reps that when you go to a library conference, be very nice to the vendor in the next booth, because next year that person might be standing in your booth, and even worse, that person might be your boss. So it's important to always keep things friendly and not to burn bridges, because we're all going to see each other somewhere down the trail. It's important to document the conclusion of the partnership, again, whether it was positive or negative, so that you can refer back to that. And Maggie, I think you had an example with when you were in Wyoming with the Colorado Alliance of a partnership ending.
Thanks, Barb. We did. We had a multi-institutional partnership with a vendor, and at the end of the project, it just financially wasn't feasible for anyone involved. It was very difficult for the vendor as well as for, I think we had about 4 or 5 libraries working on that project. And at the very end, we realized that we did not have the financial resources and really the expertise. So we had a variety of large libraries and small libraries, and then we had a very young vendor as well. And so we decided that we needed to break up. It was very hard on all of us because we had invested so much time in trying something really innovative. But when it came to the conclusion, fortunately, we did have an MOU that talked about how we should break up. We also came together because we had shared resources. We had some joint computer equipment that we had invested in. And we just had to come together and decide what we would do, how we would exit the partnership. And at the end of the partnership, we were very, very disappointed that it didn't work out. But I think we also left the partnership in such a way that it didn't, as Barb mentioned, it didn't burn bridges for us to come together again in the future. It just didn't work. And so fortunately, we were able to do that with grace and humaneness. But I think having the documentation up front and then communicating throughout the relationship enabled us all to part on really good terms.
Great, thanks, Maggie. And I think that really concludes our portion of the presentation. I know we've left time. That slide always makes me laugh too. We've left time for discussion and for questions. So Ray and Rebecca, if you can help us facilitate any of the questions that have come in via chat.
Great, yes. I just wanted to say that this was really insightful hearing from all of your perspectives. I had just returned from a workshop this weekend from California Library State Association, and really it's about the creating healthy relationships being, the conversation is the relationship, and really understanding in terms of the conflict part, really having us understand what is our contribution to the conflict as well, right? As opposed to just one-sided and one person is creating them. And it made me reflect on those key points that I think it's important. So now we have time for questions and comments. I also wanted to note that I had shared an article from Against the Grain in 2018 that these three presenters co-wrote a couple of columns and different features on partnerships with vendors. And it's in a PDF and it's open to everyone. So I'm going to just paste it again. And if anyone has comments or questions, please feel free to type in the chat box. Oh, this one's from Rebecca. What has been the biggest surprise from a partnership for them, to all the presenters?
This is Maggie, and I would say the biggest surprise is really the problem solving. I'm going to go back in time for integrated library system, and when our library was selecting one, what I started to do is I started to talk with our other vendors, our non-integrated library system vendors, and was able to ask them, what do you know about these potential customers that or vendors that we might be working with? How does it work with your system? And really leaning on those relationships that I already had in order to understand the marketplace a little bit more. And I think I was really surprised about and I was a fairly new librarian at that point, or I should say new to my position. And the amount of insights that they were able to give to me was incredible, and that they would be willing to do that. I think today we try and do a lot of background work on vendors that we'll be working with, and seen how a vendor might work with another vendor, how a vendor works with software, surprised me as far as how upfront those vendors were and their expertise. And today it's a little bit different, particularly in librarianship, because so many of our content vendors are also our discovery vendors. And so, and there are fewer of them. So I think that's a little harder to tease out, but I do think that vendors are really willing to help libraries, and they're able to share their expertise with us in a way that often surprises me.
This is Barb. I think it's important to understand that not only are we partners with our libraries, but we are also partners with other vendors, other content providers. We at YBP, Go Be Library Solutions, couldn't do what we do if it were not for partnerships. We have partnerships with publishers, we have partnerships with aggregators, we have partnerships with ILS, LSP providers like Cersei Dynex. We couldn't do what we do for libraries without all of those partnerships. So, there's more than just library and vendor partnerships. There's partnerships going on at all levels of our industry.
Yeah, I agree with you both. And for me, one of the surprising things was back to the South Australia partnership on acquisitions. I was surprised kind of at just how much enthusiasm and ownership this library feels from having had a hand in developing this product. They've been evangelists really in telling other customers about what we've done together, and they're so proud of the product. And, we knew that engaging customers to have a hand in the development process would give them some investment or sense of ownership, but I guess I was surprised at the level that occurred. But it just makes sense, because back to what you said, Maggie, we're all people at the end of the day, and we necessarily take pride in something we've had a hand in developing. So that was really good to see and encouraging.
So I
think also.
Sorry.
This is Maggie. Sorry, Ray. I think also understanding that, like any in life, that not all vendors are going to be partners, and not some vendors will remain vendor. There is an ebb and a flow that happens within our relationships, and I think understanding that is helpful for libraries as well. Some libraries, you have just a very typical vendor relationship. Some vendors I have felt particularly as if it is a partnership, and then I might move to another library, or people may change in that vendor, and I move back to more of a vendor relationship. So there really is an ebb and a flow that can happen. But I think what's important is that as libraries, as we think about some of the problems that we are working through, we're trying to figure out solutions, that if we think we could work with a vendor on a relationship and develop that into a partnership to maximize those solutions into a win-win situation. I just encourage librarians to think about vendors as part of that, that relationship. And it may or it may not work out, but don't discount it just because it is a vendor.
Right.
So I wanted to ask a question about recruitment in terms of, from the library side, thinking about having folks who have worked in vendors, and then from vendors working from the library. And what are your thoughts on that? Usually, at least for me as a librarian, I've heard that in search committees, they completely kind of have a puzzled look when there's someone from a vendor side trying to be a librarian or vice versa. So I'll just leave it open for there.
Ray, this is Barb. I can comment to that. So I am a librarian. I've been a librarian since 1985. And I've worked in academic libraries, law libraries, but I've also been on the vendor side for a long time. My entire team are all degreed librarians. So we hire librarians all the time for what my folks do in terms of being collection development managers. That degree is essential. So we raid libraries all the time. As far as libraries moving from the vendor side back, I know lots of those folks too. So we, folks who have been, on the book vendor side, on the subscription agent side, on the ILS side, I think those are really important people to look at from a recruitment perspective because they have experience with not just one library, they have experience with many libraries over the course of their career. So there's nowhere else that you can get that kind of breadth and depth of experience.
Agreed.
Ray, this is Maggie. I would say we definitely in hiring will look at vendors, or I should say librarians who come from the vendor world. And also we'll, at least for me personally, I'll also think about librarians who might be good for working with a vendor or with a company. And so I think it's individual skill set, and I do think that you can move back and forth. I think the challenge for librarians, if they have been working with a company as opposed to inside a library, is translating that experience back to the library setting. So stressing, as Barb mentioned, their knowledge about what many different libraries are doing in a certain space, or how different libraries are solving a common issue. So I do think it's incumbent upon the individual to articulate how those skill sets will transfer from a for-profit company to a public entity like a library.
Great, thanks for your responses. This is another question from the chat box. Vendors could provide their own services. Sometimes libraries and vendors compete. Why would they want to help libraries?
Well,
I think Barb or Rick. I think Rick, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for one, helping libraries is in our DNA, and it's not, altruistic or completely self-serving. The idea is that if we want a sustainable company with continued revenue, libraries have to be successful. So if we're not helping drive the success of libraries, that hurts our own jobs, frankly. I mean, so for me, that's kind of a no-brainer. And again, it's not just some marketing spiel. We serve libraries. If libraries lose, we lose. It's a simple calculation. And in involving libraries in developing a product totally makes sense, because we could go away and do something in a box, in a vacuum, and then release it and say, here you go, voila, buy it, use it. But if we involve actual libraries and we develop what they want and we have them guide us to developing that, then our chance of success is much greater. And we've proven that again and again and again. And we have something called a strategic partner program at Circe Dynex. And at any given time, we have more than a dozen tracks running where we are either developing a new product or a major enhancement to another product. And we involve scores of libraries who participate in reviewing the product, even as early as wireframes on through early alpha testing, beta testing, live pilots, And that program has been so successful because, again, libraries feel invested. They think that they know that we're developing what they want, and then it's just the outcome is they get a product that they had a hand in, and it's doing what they asked for. So it just makes sense all around.
This is Barb. I would agree with Rick. I mean, we are, both my company and Rick's company, we are library industry companies. We're not Microsoft or Google, who happens to have a library division, or Amazon, who can sell you books. We specialize in libraries. So it's, you know, while we might all be for-profit entities, profit drives future growth. So if we can't make a profit on what we're doing, what we're developing, we can't grow as a company, and we won't be here to serve libraries. So it really is, it's an ecosystem, and we all are participants in that.
Great. So we have one question. This could be the last one. I believe this one could be for Barb and Rick. How do you select libraries to participate?
Barb, do you want to tackle that, or you want me to?
Call us. Let us know what you're interested in. Really, it's all about the communication. We would love to have a conversation with you about some type of project or product or service that you feel like we should develop. You know, we'll be very upfront with you in terms of if we think we can do it and whether or not it's feasible. And so yeah, reach out to us, or reach out to any other vendor that you're interested in working with.
Yeah, and I should say, I go to all of our user groups, our international meetings, I should say the larger ones, and some regional, national user groups. And those just informal discussions at the receptions, at dinner, I often lead the conversation with, tell me what you're working on that's exciting. And that just leads us down paths of discussing problems that they might be having, or areas they wish they had a better solution for. And in every collaborative project, that's kind of how it started. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to talk to your vendor. We're not going to bite. Well, you know, not up front. So anyway, but have those conversations, and that'll lead to hopefully some bigger and better things.
This is Maggie, and I know a vendor has approached us and helping them solve a question that they have. And it came about in a way that Rick has just mentioned. They were asking us, what are you doing in your library? What exciting things? What are your challenges? And as a result of that, they've asked us to right now serve on an informal advisory board, just to try and understand what the environment is like and how they might either participate or not participate in creating solutions for that. So I think at the end of the day, and we've talked throughout today about communication, that it really is being open, communicating with vendors, and then either exploring a possible partnership or not. But it really comes down to the success of vendors, the success of libraries. We're just woven together, and it is based on that strong communication that we have within the greater ecosystem of libraries.
Great, thank you all. With that, I want to wrap up and thank our speakers, Maggie, Barb, and Rick, for spending the day with us this time, just sharing their wisdom and advice on this important topic. I do want to acknowledge and thank the SLA Leadership Management Division's communication team, as well as my co-chair for professional development, Rebecca Jones, for helping set up this Zoom platform, and for all of you for attending this session. I hope you were able to take something back. I do want to mention before we close that we have another free webinar coming up in November 13th called Solutions Driven Services with Rebecca Brizzi. It's about success is not about what you do. Success is about what you solve and how your solutions work for your clients. You bring value to your clients when you solve their problems. The challenge is that the client experiences the solution after your work is done. This will be free and we'll send out announcements. You can also check it at SLA Connect page at the Leadership and Management Division. That being said, thank you all for joining and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Ray. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.